In the age of Kickstarter and Steam, a lot of old video game genres have been making a resurgence lately. Puzzles, point-and-click, and dungeon crawler games have been really popular on these platformers, but in addition, the 3D platformer has also been making a comeback. So, we thought we'd dedicate our first month here at the Game Detectives to the mother of all platformers, Rare.
Yeah, we're going to take our first week of Rare Month and look at one of the most beloved platforms in the genre, Banjo-Kazooie. So, why not start at the beginning?
Alright, so when you first turn on the game, you see the traditional Nintendo logo that comes before a lot of Nintendo 64 games. But then the Rare logo pops up, and a dragonfly runs right into it, setting the tone for the rest of the game. The baddie plummets into a pond, and then Banjo, Kazooie, Mumbo, and Tootie all show up to perform a musical number. And Mumbo and Kazooie goof off in the background, and Banjo scolds them and acts like the adult, and Tootie's cheerful and happy. And the sequence really introduces each character and their role in the game, while also giving you a feel for the color and tone and humor before you start playing.
After the opening scene ends, players begin on Spiral Mountain. Here the game gives you a vital choice that sets the mood for the rest of the decisions in the game, and nicely introduces the benefits of exploring its world. You can choose to either go through a tutorial with bottles to learn Banjo and Kazooie's basic controls, or you can decide to skip the tutorial and go right to Grunty's Lair. Additionally, as you learn these moves, you can use them to collect empty honeycombs which extend your health bar. Now, this allows the players to reward themselves for going that extra mile and learning through the game, but if you've played it before or consider yourself to be a more advanced player, you can skip that all and go right to the action.
So when you first collect these objects, the items themselves show up with googly eyes and funny lines to state exactly what they're used for, which clears up any confusion the player has in the game, and also gives each item its individual character, which feeds into the fairy tale aspect of it. So when you move on to Grunty's Lair from Spiral Mountain, the game introduces the mechanics of opening up levels right away. As you enter the lair, you easily collect your first Jiggy piece within seconds, and then learn how to insert these Jiggies into portraits to open up the individual levels. So the action doesn't stop when you move into the lair and to the first level.
Similarly, Mumbo's Mountain, the first world of the game, seamlessly incorporates new moves and mechanics while not overwhelming the player. Notes lead players to important sites of the level like coins in a Mario game. These sites are segmented just enough so that each element does not interrupt another. Notes, Mumbo Skulls, Jinjos, and Molehills are placed far enough apart from one another that they do not crowd one section of the game.
Yet, they are close enough so the player doesn't get confused as to where they're supposed to go next. When you collect one thing, there's always another object you can see, and these objects help the player find their way to the Jiggies of the level. Mumbo's Mountain also introduces Mumbo and transformations, and the witch switches that reveal Jiggies outside of the level. Additionally, players can gather everything in one playthrough of Mumbo's Mountain, and almost every single level of the game, which helps keep the game flowing from one world to the next.
The three moves you learn on this level can be used for much more than their original purpose. Egg firing and the Beak Buster not only help you find the Jiggies in Mumbo's Mountain, but they can also be used as a way to attack enemies, while the Talon Trot can be used to not only climb steep hills, but move faster in general.
In fact, most of the moves in the game have more than one purpose, and these different purposes can be used to solve puzzles in different ways. For example, if you want to reach a new height, you can either use a jump pad or a flight pad. And this allows puzzles to be a little more complex, and also allows players to progress through levels in different ways.
Now, one flaw with the game is there are a few moves that are very specific to certain contexts. For example, the wading boots that you learn in Bubblegum Swamp are only used for crossing treacherous pathways like swamps or hot sands, and the Beak Buster is really only used to push a few buttons here and there.
Yeah.
It is used in the end battle when you fight Gruntilda, so it does have that, but as a general rule, the best moves are ones that can be applied to many different contexts.
The second level in the game, Treasure Trove Cove, builds nicely off of Mumbo's Mountain by introducing more characters as well as expanding on the mechanics in the game. While there is a little bit of water in the first level, the second level gives the player a lot more experience with it by including pools that the player has to dive down into, as well as letting them swim in the water surrounding the beach. And the Shark Snacker helps keep the player from swimming too far out and keeps the level centered on the island.
The level also introduces the first boss character of the game, Nipper. It's relatively easy to read his patterns and defeat him, and introduces the player to how the semi-boss fights will look like in the game. Additionally, the level introduces more height in the level design by making the island tall. The mount can be ascended by flying or climbing, which helps the players get used to the verticality of future levels.
And Treasure Trove Cove introduces the most important character of the game, Captain Blubber, who sounds like he burps when he talks.
Now, coming off the second level, you would hope to see more great moves, level design, and characters, but Banjo-Kazooie does veer off course in its third world, Clanker's Cavern. A water level that throws off the flow of the beginning of the game by neglecting what the game was built upon.
The problem with Clanker's Cavern begins with the level design itself. Clanker's Cavern really only has dark greens and browns for color, whereas Treasure Trove Cove and Mummo's Mountain had greens and yellows and blues and every other color you could think of. Many of the jiggies in Clanker's Cavern are inside of Clanker himself, which even further cuts off the player from the rest of the level. By trapping the player inside of a sewer and then Clanker, in addition, the game limits the openness and sense of exploration inspired by the first levels, all of which take place primarily outdoors.
In order to reach Clanker, you have to dive ridiculously deep and swim in a key 3 times to raise this garbage monster up. This is a challenge that has not even been precedented earlier in the game and throws off the momentum by not allowing you to explore the entirety of the level right away, which almost every other level lets you do.
In general, Clanker's Cavern just doesn't fit with the rest of the levels in the game. All the other levels are bright, open places that encourage exploration, but Clanker's Cavern is dark and dirty and centers on Clanker himself and extends around him, which clashes with the design of other levels, which are all very horizontal or vertical. Even Rusty Bucket Bay, which centers on a ship, and the surrounding water, extends beyond the water and includes many jiggies which are found on land.
After Clanker's Cavern, the game goes back to the design aspects and scaffolding from the first 2 levels. Bubblegoop Swamp, Frazizi Peak, Gobi's Desert, Mad Monster Mansion, and Rusty Bucket Bay all build off one another and become increasingly difficult, but also manageable for the player. Besides the engine room, which I skipped on this playthrough.
The only problem I have with the last couple of levels is that you learn fewer moves as the levels go on, and you don't even learn any in the last 3 levels, which makes the worlds feel a little emptier because you don't get to see bottles and you're not building upon what you've already learned so far.
The last level in the game is Click Clock Wood. It has a unique level design that centers on a tree going through all 4 seasons, where there's a different section for each season. Spring contains a switch which opens the summer section, which has the switch that opens the fall section, and you get it. The seasons serve as a fun and interesting mechanic that really challenges the player by having to plan their actions and complete tasks in the previous season before they get farther in the next.
For example, you first meet the beaver Naughty in spring, and are able to access his home by swimming in it. But in summer, when the water level lowers, you have to destroy a boulder that falls in front of Naughty's house. In autumn, you can access his home to find a Jiggy. But you had to have removed the boulder in summer in order to get that Jiggy. There are other characters such as Nabnut, Eerie, and Gobi that you have to interact with in multiple seasons in order to fully collect every Jiggy and note in the level.
The continuity between seasons helps make the level seem fluid and connected, even though it's 4 distinct parts. In addition to the complex level design, the height of a central tree and the complex platforming skills the player must perform makes the level the hardest in the game to finish, but challenge builds off the previous levels, leading to an extremely effective last level in the game.
After Click Clock Wood, Banjo and Kazooie can finally face off against the main villain Gruntilda in a quiz show? At first, Grunty's Furnace Fun seems to throw off the momentum of the game leading up to the final battle, but it actually proves to be an extremely fun and unique way to recap the entire journey up to this point.
The questions range from level music to character voices, and only players who actually took the time to explore each level will be able to answer enough of the questions to fully complete the game. This allows another incentive to explore all of the worlds and interact with all of the characters in the game, but does so in a fun way that engages the player and allows for a lot of jokes.
The only misstep in Grunty's Furnace Fun are the death squares. These squares instantly kill you if you get a question wrong, as opposed to just taking away one honeycomb like the others. If you fail on one of these squares, you have to start the game all over again, which interrupts the flow of Furnace Fun. These squares do offer incentives to collect Joker cards, but they could have easily kept both of these squares out.
After Furnace Fun, there is a credits roll that shows all of the main characters in the game, which is another nice way to recap everything you've done leading up to the final battle. After Tootie reminds Banjo that they still need to defeat Grunty, the game takes you back to the top of her lair.
But before you can fight Grunty in the final battle, you have to complete one more puzzle, and it takes a lot of jiggies. So, if you hadn't collected 92 jiggies before you got to this point in the game, you have to go back to other levels and get some jiggies that you missed along the way. This interrupts the flow of the game, especially the tension you feel when you get to the final battle, because once you get there, you might have to go back.
When you finally do reach Grunty, the boss fight proves to be very challenging, but builds naturally off of everything you've done previously in the game. You utilize almost every single move you've learned throughout the game in different stages of the boss fight, and the sheer length of the battle proves that Grunty and the Banjo-Kazooie game as a whole are more challenging than let on, bringing tension even higher.
But the ending section of this boss fight seems a little strange to me. You have to shoot eggs into these Jinjo statues, which then turn into regular Jinjos that attack Grunty. Ultimately, the mighty Jinjonator delivers the final blow to Grunty, which takes away control from the player and made me feel a little detached from the final scene.
Now, I liked using the Jinjos at the end of the fight. It was weird and funny in that quirky sort of rare way. I'll admit it came out of nowhere, but nonetheless I found it entertaining.
I think they could have started off the battles with the Jinjos taking down some special shield or something that Grunty produces. That way, Grunty stays intimidating, but you also get that satisfaction of delivering the final blow yourself.
With that, Grunty is defeated and Banjo-Kazooie is complete. At the end, you're treated to a staff credits roll where they give their names to characters in the game, and it's very charming and another great way to go back and look at the adventure you've had. And with that, we assert that Banjo-Kazooie is not only one of the greatest platformers of all time, but one of the greatest games of all time. It has amazing music, charming visuals, memorable characters and worlds, and a great sense of progression that builds as you play with a lasting impact. Banjo-Kazooie will always remain one of our favorite games.
Banjo-Kazooie really works because of all the little things coming together to make a seamless experience for the player. So, what do you think? Do you love Banjo-Kazooie or do you absolutely hate it? Let us know in the comments.
Or maybe you just hate us and our review style. Let us know that too. Could be helpful.